Yo, Atlas speaking and welcome to part 10 of What If I Was Reborn in Attack on Titan as a civilian nobody with the gamer system. Let the tale begin. Chapter 181. Is it time already? Locke's expression was complicated. He stood beside Grisha in the quiet hallway of the headquarters. From the window, the soft afternoon light spilled over the man who had given him guidance, shelter, and trust. Grisha's voice was gentle but tinged with sadness. There are only 3 months left. I'm sorry, Locke. I may not be able to help you much longer. I want to spend whatever time I have with my family. His eyes drifted toward Dina Fritz, who waited silently beside him. Come home with me tonight, Grisha said softly. Dina blinked, her voice trembling. CA, can I? She had learned everything, about Grisha's years on parody, about Carla, about Aaron. She did not show hatred or jealousy. Only a quiet ache, and longing for the son she lost long ago. Even Zeke. Even after betrayal, he remained her child. Grisha smiled. Of course. Carla will understand. And, what we've been hiding must be brought to light. Locke, when the time comes, you'll help explain everything to the people, right? Locke nodded without hesitation. Of course. They have the right to know. Information control wasn't meant to deceive the island forever, only to ensure the truth was introduced steadily, safely. Once people understood the reality of Eldians, Marley, and the Titans, plans could finally move forward. Grisha exhaled in relief. Thank you. Locke shook his head. This is what I should do. Then he paused and asked quietly. Does Aaron know yet? Not yet, Grisha admitted. I plan to tell him tonight. Locke hesitated. I'll come too. But, try not to cause too much noise. He had wanted to dissuade Grisha from forcing Aaron to inherit the attack Titan. But one look at Grisha's resolute eyes silenced him. Some destinies belong to the Jaeger name. Grisha nodded. All right. Silence fell as the three of them stepped outside. They walked through the streets, busy workers rebuilding houses, children running between stands, people smiling with the first warmth they'd felt in years. The peace felt surreal. Dina watched everything with wide, absorbed eyes. Grisha explained each landmark, each custom, each new change slowly and patiently. Locke walked behind them, watching their quiet, intimate steps, and felt a pang of envy. When will I meet someone like that? 1 home. 2 people. 3 meals. 4 seasons. A life shared from sunrise to dusk, until silver hair. The thought warmed him, then embarrassed him. He shook his head sharply, pushing the fantasy aside and catching up before he drifted too far behind. They reached the Jaeger household. Carla stood at the doorway, apron tied over her dress, clearly mid-preparation for dinner. She froze when Grisha approached with Dina beside him. But she did not shout. She did not cry. She simply stared, breath held in her chest. Grisha squeezed Dina's hand. Locke swallowed. Are you sure you're not afraid of Aunt Carla getting angry? But Grisha only smiled, then stepped through the door. Locke followed. Dad! Aaron bolted from the living room, barreling straight into Locke's leg instead. Mikasa trailed behind, quiet as always but strangely brighter when Locke entered the house. Brother Locke! Locke! Both children grabbed his hands. Locke chuckled and ruffled their hair, earning simultaneous squints of contentment. But Aaron quickly snapped back to alertness. Hey, who's the pretty lady with Dad? Locke's mouth twitched. Pretty lady. She's your father's first wife. So maybe, don't call her aunt. What? Aaron and Mikasa's voices overlapped. Mikasa bolted inside instantly. Aaron hesitated, then ran after her. Locke stayed outside. This is their family matter. Barging in would be inappropriate. He waited. There was no shouting. No crying. Only murmurs from inside. But behind him came a warm, familiar laugh. Locke! Why are you standing out here? Aren't you going in? Uncle Hannes approached with a packet of dried fish, his walk relaxed, his eyes soft. Let's go together, Locke said. Hannes chuckled. That kid, look at you now. Commander of the Survey Corps. You've become a living legend. All of Shiganshina, even half of Walsina, talks about you. Locke smiled modestly. No matter how powerful I am, I started as your apprentice. So technically, Uncle Hannes, you're more impressive than me. Hannes puffed out his chest. Of course. Then his expression softened. But Locke, don't let people down. Your decisions now affect the whole island. You carry more than you think. Locke nodded. I know. They stepped inside. The scene surprised him. Aaron and Mikasa sat quietly, still confused but calm. Carla, Dina, and Hannes's wife, Marth, were seated together, talking. Laughing, even. Grisha stood awkwardly in the corner, clearly overwhelmed. Carla noticed Locke enter and smiled warmly. Locke, come in. This is Dina. Locke bowed slightly. Aunt Dina. Dina returned a gentle nod, relief flooding her expression. She had feared rejection. Instead, she found acceptance. A fragile but real peace. And Locke realized something. This household, once divided by fate and tragedy, had taken its first step toward healing. Tomorrow would be difficult. Next month would be dangerous. And the future would be a battlefield. But tonight was a beginning. And beginnings mattered. Chapter 182, compared to Locke's calm, Hannes was utterly bewildered. Once he finally pieced together Dina's identity and her history with Grisha, his expression froze. Then came disbelief. Then envy. Then panic as Martha immediately pinched his arm hard enough to make him wince. He would definitely be sleeping on the floor tonight. How miserable. After dinner, Locke didn't stay long. He said his goodbyes and stepped out into the cooling night air. He needed to move. These past weeks have been dominated by reorganizing the military, implementing policy reforms, and managing countless details. His body felt stiff, almost foreign. I hope both uncles can sleep well tonight, Locke sighed, amusingly. With light steps, he headed back toward the base. It wasn't far, and he soon caught sight of Petra, Emer, and Historia eating together. Petra stood first. Locke, you ate already? At home. You've all worked hard these days. His eyes flicked toward Historia, whose mood was visibly dimmer. Locke understood instantly. You met your father? Historia nodded weakly. He begged me to ask you to spare his life. Petra had already explained Rodrice's situation to her during the past week. Locke had told Petra and Emer to prepare her gradually. If Historia accepted it, she could stay. If she couldn't, Locke would not force her into a battlefield she wasn't ready for. Especially given her royal blood. A liability at the wrong moment. A weapon in the right one. To his relief, Historia had shown no signs of breakdown or extremism, only sorrow, disappointment, and quiet reflection. Seeing her now, Locke spoke honestly. I'm sorry. I can't promise that. The agreement with Darius Zackley was to hand Rod over. Zackley had fulfilled everything Locke asked of him. Locke would not betray that trust, not at this fragile stage. Historia lowered her head. I understand. Petra opened her mouth, sympathy overflowing, but Emer put a firm hand on her arm, stopping her. Locke nodded to the three. Heat. I'll be at the training ground. If anything comes up, find me. He didn't wait for replies. He went upstairs, changed into training clothes, and stepped outside again. Petra frowned as his silhouette disappeared. Emer, why didn't you let me speak? Emer's response was cold, but not unkind. Do you want to make things harder for him? Petra fell silent. Emer leaned back in her chair. We're stable right now only because Zackley is cooperating. If Locke breaks his promise over Rod Rice, the entire political balance collapses. Even if Locke controls the three branches, plus the training corps and Kenny's anti-personnel squad, it won't be enough. Petra swallowed. You mean, the merchants, the religious remnants, militia groups? Exactly, Emer said. People who can stir the masses. Unpredictable groups. We need Zackley to keep them in line until reforms are complete. Her gaze drifted toward Historia. And Locke can't afford internal cracks. Not now. Historia looked up, forcing a small smile. Thank you both, but don't make things difficult for him. Maybe this is fate. Petra hugged her gently. Training ground. Locke circled the track again and again, feet pounding against dirt, breath steady and strong. The cold air felt sharp in his lungs. He welcomed it. Rod Rice's matter didn't occupy his thoughts. What consumed him instead was the tightening timeline. Marley should be sending warriors soon. It had been too long since their last infiltration. If his understanding was correct, Marley lay to the south of Paradis. Reiner's path during their original attack aligned with that direction. Locke muttered under his breath. I need a contingency. I can't let us be caught off guard. Outside Shiganshina, Mishi Zacharias commanded a defensive team, but even for a top-tier warrior, Mishi alone wasn't enough. There were too many unknowns. I should go myself. Locke clenched his jaw. But he was needed here. Leading now could destabilize everything Erwin, Levi, and he had built. Then Levi will have to lead the scout detachment, but Erwin still hasn't finished reorganizing the military police and garrison. Erwin's workload was beyond overwhelming. Rebuilding 2 corps from scratch was nearly impossible, but he was the only man Locke trusted to do so. And time wasn't waiting. New conscription. Keith Shotties had already reported that the most recent recruit class was nearly ready for deployment. That alone opened options. But the real challenge lay in purging unqualified or corrupt soldiers from the military police and garrison. That would require careful planning and patience. Fresh blood was needed. Quickly. Locke accelerated. His speed increased steadily. Even after dozens of laps, he showed no signs of slowing. His body, after more than a year of training, conditioning, and battles, was no longer normal. Endurance, strength, reflexes, every metric had surpassed human limits. Against a 3 to 4 meter Titan, he felt confident he could win barehanded. A step closer to his ideal, tearing down Titans with nothing but his fists. But he knew well. In a world advancing technologically, fists alone aren't enough. Not against bullets. Not against artillery. He needed power deeper than muscle. He needed technology. Paradis needed engineers, scientists, innovators, people who could help transform the island into a stronghold capable of standing against Marley's military might. His mind drifted to faces he'd seen. Technicians. Inventors. Recruits with potential. Civilians with sparks of talent. Paradis needed them all. Locke slowed his pace, sweat dripping down his forehead, and whispered into the night. Paradis Island needs these people. The moon hung high above him, silent, watchful. Far beyond the horizon, in the dark waters south of the island. Marley was already on the move. Chapter 183. By noon the next day, Locke saw Dina Fritz return to the base safe and unharmed, walking beside Grisha with a calmness she hadn't possessed days earlier. The gentle smile on Grisha's face confirmed everything. The Jaeger household had accepted the truth. I explained everything to Carla, Grisha said, visibly relieved. She accepted it. Locke nodded, quietly respectful of Carla's grace. He hesitated before asking. And, did you tell Aaron about inheriting the attack titan? Grisha froze. His fingers twitched. That. He couldn't finish the sentence. Because the moment Locke mentioned Aaron, Grisha's eyes faltered. His guilt surfaced, and because along with Aaron came the memory of another son. Zeke. Dina's expression dimmed as well. She didn't speak, but her grief spilled through her silence. Though she had never once blamed Zeke for betraying them, she carried the weight of knowing why it happened. They had pushed him too hard, demanded too much, forced him to accept an ideology he barely understood. They saw a savior. Zeke saw suffocation. "It was our fault," Dina whispered. "We forced our dreams onto him, a child. We thought we were giving him purpose, but we only trapped him." Grisha's voice trembled. "Am I really wrong, Locke?" His steadfastness wavered, finally, after years of carrying guilt alone. Locke met his gaze seriously. "I think Aaron should choose for himself." Both Grisha and Dina stared at him. "Let him choose," Grisha murmured. "But he's not a child anymore," Locke said gently. "Aaron has seen life, death, cruelty, and sacrifice. He knows what freedom means. He's capable of deciding his own path." Locke added, voice steady. "If he agrees, he'll inherit the attack titan. If he doesn't, then we choose another soldier from the Survey Corps. Someone loyal who believes in the future we're trying to build." He paused. "But the most important thing is that the decision comes from him." This wasn't just a political decision. It was a human one. Locke already knew Aaron possessed the exact traits the attack titan required: resolve, passion, the unbreakable instinct to fight forward. But he also understood that repeating Zeke's story, repeating the mistakes of the past, would destroy the boy. Grisha slowly exhaled. Dina squeezed his hand with quiet support, saying nothing, but her eyes said, "I trust you." Locke gave them space and sat by the window, watching soldiers train. He let his mind drift. From Marley's absence so far, Paradis should have a period of stability. Reforms will advance, but true breakthroughs require years. And years, we don't have. Education, technology, manpower, and artillery all lag far behind the world beyond the sea. It took other nations decades, even a century, Locke whispered. Paradis can't catch up overnight. What we lack most is time. Paradis needed a miracle. Or an opportunity. If Marley acts soon, it may be a blessing in disguise. If Zeke himself led the mission, even better. With both of his parents here, capturing Zeke would be easier, Locke muttered. Even if he never changes his ideals, we could still use him. At that moment, Grisha spoke up behind him. "Locke. I've decided." The Locke turned. "I'll talk to Aaron today," Grisha said firmly. "I'll explain everything, the truth, the power, the burden. This time, he chooses. I won't repeat my mistake." Dina nodded, her expression steady. Locke stood. "A wise choice. Do you want me to call Aaron here?" "If you could, I'd appreciate it." "It's nothing," Locke replied. "Talk together first. Think through what you want to say." With that, Locke slipped from the room, leaving the couple alone. Dina leaned gently against Grisha. "Aaron choosing his own path, that's the best way. I don't want him to become like Zeke." Grisha's eyes clouded again. "We didn't think it through. If we hadn't pushed Zeke so hard, maybe none of this would have happened. The restorationists wouldn't have been wiped out. You wouldn't have been." He stopped, voice breaking. Dina squeezed his hand again. "Grisha, listen. When I was injected, the officer told me something." Grisha looked up sharply. "We were under Marleyan surveillance long before Zeke said anything," Dina whispered. "Even if Zeke hadn't reported us, they would have taken us." "They already knew." Grisha's breath caught. He hadn't known that. "Zeke only stepped ahead of what would have happened anyway," Dina said, voice soft and sad. "He didn't condemn us. Marley did." Grisha's expression froze, then slowly collapsed into a deep, aching grief. "So, we blamed him for something he wasn't responsible for," he whispered. "We were too optimistic back then," Dina said. "Too naive." We thought changing a nation would be easy. But it's like Locke says, only when we're truly strong can we talk about liberating Eldia. Strength first. Everything else later. She looked up at Grisha, eyes tender. It seems you trust Locke very much. Grisha smiled faintly, tired, but sincere. Yes. He's someone who sees farther than we do. Someone who understands the world better than either of us ever could. He took a deep breath. And for Aaron, perhaps Locke's judgment is what we needed all along. Dina leaned her head on his shoulder. The sunlight softened around them. Tonight, they would face Aaron. Tonight, they would reveal the past, the truth, and the burden of the future. Tonight, a boy would choose his path. And with that choice, the fate of Parody would shift. Chapter 184, the Survey Corps headquarters had officially moved into the capital. The shift immediately stirred discussion among the citizens, but unlike years past, when mention of the Survey Corps invited scorn, this time the reactions were hopeful, relieved even. The people had seen Titans breach the walls. They had seen the military police fail. And they had seen the Survey Corps save them. We should have brought them here ages ago. Now the Titans won't dare attack. With the Survey Corps in the capital, maybe we'll actually survive the next emergency. Some chatted excitedly in the marketplaces. Did you read the newspaper today? About the outside world? Yes. They say there are wagons that move without horses, and ships that sail hundreds of people across oceans. Impossible. That's just some writer's fantasy novel. I'm not so sure. The government relaxed old restrictions. They're even encouraging invention now. Anyone who creates something useful can get a government job and a reward. Really? The royal government announced it? Yes. Well, if that's true, I should look through my grandfather's notes. Maybe something there could help me. Some wagons move now, freer, more open. Not entirely safe, of course. Opportunists existed everywhere. But Locke didn't have the luxury to micromanage every corner of society. Time and practice would test which reforms worked and which needed fixing. Survey Corps headquarters, entrance. Locke stood beside Levi, who watched the open courtyard with a tight expression. Thank you for your hard work, Locke said. Levi didn't react at first. Then he glanced sideways. I hope your judgment is correct. The timing lines up, Locke replied calmly. Marley should move soon. Truthfully, he wasn't certain, but it was enough to push Levi toward Shiganshina. Once Levi arrived, the rest would fall into place. Levi adjusted his cloak. If they come, I'll hold Shiganshina until your reinforcements arrive. I trust you. Locke's voice sharpened with sincerity. But if it becomes impossible, prioritize survival. Bring back as many soldiers as you can. This won't be a short conflict with Marley. It'll be a war of attrition. We can't throw our lives away for a single district. Levi nodded. I know. He was quiet for a moment, staring at Locke intensely, as if searching for the reckless boy who once challenged him to spar with wide, determined eyes. That boy no longer existed. In his place stood the de facto leader of Parody Island, not by title, but by the invisible weight he carried. I'm leaving, Levi said softly. He mounted his horse. The 100 soldiers selected for this mission gathered behind him, disciplined, battle-ready, a far cry from the soldiers the walls once produced. Locke stepped back, drawing in a breath. Come back alive. Levi didn't look back. I will. But inside, he whispered. Don't disappoint me, kid. The formation galloped out of the gate. Dust rose. The shadows stretched. Locke watched until Levi and his squad vanished from sight. Footsteps approached behind him. Locke, Kenny's been waiting in your office for a while now, Petra said, slightly breathless from rushing over. Locke exhaled, rubbing his forehead. Thank you. It's been hard on you. Petra folded her arms, annoyed. Not just me. Emer and even Historia have been drowning in paperwork. You should thank them too, after all this chaos is over. It was true. Locke was, essentially, the biggest hands-off commander the Corps had ever seen. After establishing direction, he dumped nearly everything else onto Petra, Emer, and Historia. They barely had time to eat. If Aluo, Gunther, and ELD hadn't recently returned to assist with logistics, those three women might have collapsed. But instead of giving them a break, Locke had immediately sent Aluo and the others to join Levi and Shiganshina. Petra had not forgiven him for that. Locke grinned and lightly flicked her nose. I'll talk to them. Don't be angry. Come, let's see Kenny. I need to hear what he's thinking. Petra's cheeks flushed instantly. I'm not angry. But she followed him, step for step. Locke didn't notice her expression. His mind was already shifting toward the next challenge. Kenny doesn't wait idly. If he's come alone to headquarters, he wants something. He pushed the thought aside as they reached the office door. Commander, the guard saluted. Locke nodded and entered. Inside the office, Kenny Ackerman stood with his back to them, gazing out the wide floor-to-ceiling window. From here, one could see the entire courtyard, including the exact path Levi had taken moments ago. Kenny didn't turn as Locke stepped in. But Locke could tell from the tension in his shoulders. He had been watching the entire farewell. Whatever Kenny wanted, whatever he had come to discuss, had everything to do with Levi. And everything to do with what was coming next. Locke closed the door behind him. Kenny, he said. I'm here. Kenny exhaled slowly, finally turning around, a small, unreadable smile on his lips. Well, kid. He tilted his hat. Looks like things are getting interesting. The room fell into a taut silence. The calm before the storm. Chapter 185, What did you say? Petra's voice cracked in disbelief, her hands clenched tightly at her sides. Locke raised a hand, signaling for calm. Lower your voice, he said evenly. You're talking about the banned sects and the merchant syndicates, aren't you? Kenny's grin widened. So you already know. How about I do you a favor and deal with them for you? Locke's expression didn't shift. What do you want as payment? Kenny whistled. Straight to business, huh? Don't make me sound so cheap, kid. Am I that kind of man? Yes, Locke said without hesitation. Kenny froze mid-grin. You really don't hold back, do you? Petra bit her lip to stop a laugh, but the tension in the air made her chest feel tight. Well then, Kenny said, spreading his hands theatrically. I've got a small request. Shouldn't be hard for someone in your position. He glanced toward Petra. Mind closing the door, sweetheart? Petra scowled, but did as he asked. The soft click echoed like a closing verdict. Locke stepped closer, his tone low and certain. You know I can't give you Titan power. Not now. Kenny chuckled. That's not it. I want to leave the capital. Or, more specifically, he adjusted his hat, eyes darkening, I'm heading to Shiganshina. Locke studied his face carefully. For Levi? Kenny met his gaze head-on. The faint amusement in his eyes didn't quite hide something deeper, pride, guilt, maybe even affection. That's part of it, Kenny said quietly. But not all. There are things I still need to do with my own hands. I've spent my life standing in shadows, watching others act. I'm done waiting. Locke understood instantly. It wasn't redemption Kenny was after. It meant something. Fine, Locke said at last. But before you leave, do me one favor. Clean up the capital first. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small, black case, unmarked, compact, and sealed with a simple latch. He offered it to Kenny. You know how to use this, Locke said. Who you use it on, or whether you use it at all, is up to you. Kenny flipped open the case, peeked inside, and gave a satisfied smile. Now that's what I call a parting gift. Don't worry, I'll make sure those rats never see dawn. Guess this is goodbye for now, Commander. Locke's lips curved slightly. I'll look forward to our next meeting. With a tilt of his hat, Kenny turned and strode out, boots clicking against the marble floor. His men fell in behind him silently. Within moments, they were gone. A blood-red dusk was falling over the city. Petra remained motionless by the window, watching the disappearing silhouettes. Finally, she turned sharply. Locke, are we really still cooperating with someone like Kenny Ackerman? Her voice trembled between anger and disbelief. Locke arched an eyebrow. Why not? Why not? She repeated. He's dangerous, unstable, unpredictable. That's exactly why he's useful. Petra stared at him, speechless. There are things we can't touch, Locke said calmly, not without losing legitimacy. That's where Kenny and his anti-personnel squad come in. They move where Locke cannot. That may be true, Petra said, her tone tight with frustration, but trusting someone like him is reckless. Locke flicked her forehead lightly, smiling. Relax. Kenny's not as unreliable as he seems. He's pure, in a way. His motives are simple, and that makes him easier to predict than most politicians. Petra frowned. Pure? That's not the word I'd use for a man who's killed half the underground. That's why you're better than him, Locke said. And why I can't afford to be. He turned away, voice cooling. Anyway, enough philosophy. Gather a team. There'll be bodies tonight. You'll lead cleanup and collection. Petra blinked. Collection? Locke gave her a pointed look. Merchant estates, ledgers, assets, everything. Don't let it go to waste. Petra sighed. I see. The treasury will grow overnight. Her voice held reluctant admiration and a trace of pity. You knew about these rebels long ago, didn't you? You waited until they all gathered, just to wipe them out in one night. Locke met her gaze without flinching. It's efficient. And it ensures they're all gone. These factions were never going to stop. Better to cut the infection out than let it fester. He looked out the window again, where the first torches of evening flickered in the streets. There's always someone waiting in the dark to strike at what's built in the light. We can't let them linger. The quiet finality in his tone left Petra no room for argument. I'll find them, she said at last. Her expression hardened, all emotion replaced by the cold efficiency of a soldier. That night, when darkness fell, the city seemed to hold its breath. The people of the capital slept soundly, unaware of what was happening beneath their windows. Kenny Ackerman's anti-personnel squad moved like phantoms, striking without hesitation. Warehouses burned. Secret cellars bled. The cries of men who once whispered of rebellion were swallowed by the night. Not just sect leaders. Not just merchants. Their enforcers, their spies, their financiers, all gone. Every trace of the anti-government network was erased before dawn. Petra's division followed hours later, sweeping through the aftermath, documenting, collecting, cleaning. At first, some soldiers hesitated. The bodies, the blood, the silent streets, it felt wrong. But when they saw the evidence, the torture records, the assassination plans, that hesitation burned away. Petra herself oversaw the confiscation of merchant vaults. Gold, property deeds, secret caches of weapons, all seized and delivered directly to the Survey Corps treasury. By sunrise, it was as though none of it had ever existed. The next morning, when the capital awoke, everything looked normal. Merchants opened their stalls. Children played in the streets. The only trace of the slaughter was a faint metallic scent drifting through the dawn breeze. Those who had heard screams in the night stayed quiet. Those who knew something chose not to speak. And those who had once plotted now lay beneath the cobblestones, their names already forgotten. The reactionary force that had simmered for months was gone. In its place, silence. Cold, absolute silence. A silence that carried both fear and order. And for Locke, that was enough. Because before they could resist the world beyond the walls, They had to cleanse the rot within. Chapter 186. Locke, you're here, Grisha said. His voice, distorted by the half-faded resonance of titanization, sounded hoarse and unsettling. Steam still curled around him like smoke rising from a dying fire. Beside him, Emer and Dina Fritz stood in similar condition, sweat-drenched, breathing heavily, but alive and controlled. As soon as they saw Locke, the three immediately halted their sparring. The ground around them was cracked and darkened from the heat of transformation. Grisha smiled faintly as he and Dina stepped closer. I can already control my form freely now, Locke said, studying Dina with a satisfied expression. Dina nodded. Yes. It's become manageable. Good. Locke crossed his arms. Control is all that matters for you. You won't be sent to the front line, not unless things truly spiral beyond repair. So from here on, you can stop combat drills. Truthfully, he had mixed feelings about the training sessions. Watching Dina and Emer bicker through half-serious mock battles reminded him less of soldiers and more of children competing for attention. It had reached the point where Locke found himself muttering, "This isn't combat, it's playing Titan tag." Emer stretched lazily. "That's fine by me." Dina smiled with relief. She was no fighter at heart, her gentleness made her unsuited for violence. Every session left her pale and trembling, though she never complained aloud. "Don't relax too much yet," Locke said. "Later tonight, I'll have a group of prisoners brought here. You'll use them to practice your coordination ability to control pure titans." Grisha blinked, his expression stiffening. "You're using living people?" Locke nodded. "Corpses can't transform. And these people are not innocent. Don't worry, I'm not capturing civilians for experiments. Every one of them earned this fate." Grisha looked uneasy. The horrors of past experiments and wars flashed in his mind. The last time the Jaegers had tried to build something through sacrifice, it had ended in ruin. But Locke's voice was calm and certain. It left no room for doubt. "These are the same people who plotted to tear down everything we've built," he continued. "Traitors. Conspirators. Reactionaries who would have thrown our people back into tyranny if they could. You saw what happened with the sects and the merchant guilds. This time, I'm ending it completely." Emer's eyes flicked toward him. "So, these are the rest of the ones hiding in the capital?" Locke's jaw tightened. "Exactly. Kenny helped clean out one layer. But that was only the surface. I've spent weeks gathering intelligence, names, locations, networks. This time, we eliminate the root." The glint in his eyes was cold enough to make even Grisha falter. He had seen Locke's ruthlessness before, but now, it had evolved into something sharper, honed by power and necessity. Grisha exhaled, conflicted. "Locke, you're far bolder than I ever was." Locke gave a quiet, humorless laugh. "Because I learned what happens when you hesitate." He turned his gaze to Dina, who had gone silent. "Don't look so uneasy. Once your control improves, these titans won't be monsters. They'll be soldiers. 1,000 of them under our command. A force no other nation could stand against." Grisha's brows knit together. 1,000. With that number, Locke said, even Marley's military would think twice before sending an invasion fleet. This island's safety depends on it. He spoke with the calm of someone describing a simple equation, but the implication was chilling. Grisha could only nod. He had long since chosen to trust the boy who had carried his ideals further than he ever could. Everything, he reminded himself, was for Eldia. The arrests began under the veil of darkness. Petra Raw led the Survey Corps' internal security teams, swift, disciplined, silent. The anti-human unit under Kenny Ackerman coordinated from the shadows, striking simultaneously in multiple districts. Every target had been identified days in advance. Religious fanatics who worshipped the false king, corrupt merchants clinging to lost privilege, and officials who had quietly funded rebellion. Those who resisted were shot on the spot. The rest were dragged to holding cells beneath the old military barracks, prisoners, not corpses. Locke needed them alive. Petra watched grimly as her squads moved through the streets. No unnecessary killing, she reminded them again and again, though she doubted anyone would listen. Many of these soldiers had lost family during the civil unrest these same men had funded. By midnight, the capital was silent. Thousands had vanished from their homes. Back at headquarters, Locke reviewed the operation reports. When Petra entered, her cloak streaked with dust, she didn't need to say a word. "It's done," she said softly. Locke nodded. "Good. Tomorrow night, Dina begins her test." Petra hesitated. "Do you really have to turn them into titans?" Locke's gaze stayed fixed on the papers in his hands. "If we execute them, their deaths serve no purpose. This way, at least they'll contribute to the island's survival." Petra bit her lip. "You make it sound so simple." "It isn't simple," he replied. "It's necessary." His voice was steady, too steady. Petra understood then that there was no reaching him on this point. Whatever line once existed in Locke's morality had long since been crossed. Yet she also knew, if he hadn't crossed it, none of them would still be alive. By dawn, the people awoke to the distant echo of gunfire. But the city remained eerily calm. Patrols moved through the streets, their presence explained away by the morning papers. Anti-government conspirators captured. Order restored in the capital. The article was brief, but carefully worded, edited personally by Locke's office. It emphasized safety, progress, and the strength of the new leadership. No mention of blood. No mention of the missing thousands. Over cups of bitter tea, citizens discussed it without fear. "I knew it. The government won't let traitors cause chaos again." "Exactly. We've suffered enough from corruption. Finally, someone is cleaning house. They say the culprits were planning to bring back the old royal system." "Good riddance." The few intellectuals who understood what was really happening chose silence. The reforms had made life better. The markets were growing, the poor were eating, and for the first time in generations, there was hope. If this was the cost of stability, so be it. Beneath the city, 1,000 prisoners sat in darkness, silent, terrified, unaware of their fate. Above them, Locke stood in the torchlight, arms folded, his reflection flickering across the iron bars. Dina and Grisha stood beside him. Emer waited by the gate, her expression unreadable. Dina's hands trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it. "Are you certain about this?" Locke nodded. "They've made their choices. Now we make ours." He turned to her. "Focus only on control. Start with 1, then 2. No more than 10 tonight." Dina hesitated, then exhaled. "Understood." Grisha rested a hand on her shoulder. "You can do this." Locke stepped back as Dina's eyes began to glow with an eerie white light. A faint tremor rippled through the underground chamber. And for the first time, the rumble of coordinated titanization echoed beneath the capital. The streets were as they had been, lively, calm, oblivious. Only the faint, metallic scent in the air hinted at the blood spilled in the shadows. To the common people, it was a peaceful day. To the nobles, it was a warning. The reactionary movement was gone. The capital's underbelly had been gutted and filled with silence. And as Locke stood atop the city walls, the wind tugging at his cloak, he knew what that silence meant. For now, they were untouchable. But in the distance, beyond the sea and the horizon, war was already on its way. Chapter 187, the night over Shiganshina district was unnervingly quiet. The only sound was the wind sweeping across the outer wall, a calm that felt too deliberate. Inside the command hall, Levi Ackerman stood at the table, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. The young soldier before him trembled slightly under the weight of that sharp, unblinking gaze. "Are you sure you didn't see it wrong?" Levi asked, his voice low but cutting. The soldier straightened instinctively, throat dry. "Why, yes, Captain. I'm certain. I used the telescope." About 10 kilometers beyond the southern ridge, a human silhouette appeared for just a moment. The figure looked directly toward my position, then vanished. The silence that followed was heavier than the stone walls around them. At Levi's side stood squad leader Mishi Zacharias, Aluo Bozado, Gunther Schultz, and ELD Jin, all recently promoted and hardened by the reforms under Commander Locke. Each pair of eyes fixed on the trembling messenger, absorbing every detail. The soldier swallowed hard. It wasn't a Titan, sir. It moved too fast, too deliberately. Levi's jaw tightened. Understood. You're dismissed. Pass the word, the entire garrison goes to full combat readiness. The soldier saluted, relief flooding his face. Yes, Captain. As soon as the door closed, Mishi exhaled quietly. So it begins. Aluo's usually smug expression was gone. His tone, unusually steady. Commander Locke's prediction was right again. I hate to admit it, but that man always seems to know before anyone else does. ELD leaned over the table, brow furrowed. If that figure really was Marleyan, then the next battle's already begun. They'll send warrior titans, no ordinary soldiers this time. Which means, Gunther muttered, his eyes narrowing, we'll be facing the 9 again. Mishi nodded gravely. Exactly. According to Locke's last debriefing, Marley should still have control of at least 6 of the 9. If we can identify their abilities early, we can counter them before they breach the gate. The air in the room felt charged, like the edge of a drawn blade. We're not the same corps we used to be, Aluo said with confidence. We've got thunder spears, field artillery, and long-range rifles. As long as they don't come in full force, we can hold them. Gunther gave a short, humorless laugh. Hold them? No. We crush them. Despite their brave words, tension filled the room. Everyone turned toward Levi. He said nothing for a long while. His eyes drifted toward the window, where the faint outline of Wall Maria glowed in the moonlight. Wall Maria will never fall again, Levi said at last, voice low and firm. Even if I have to die here. A heavy stillness fell over the command center. Levi's mind flickered briefly to Locke's face, calm, calculating, utterly unshakable as he sent him here weeks ago. If Marley comes, defend the gate. But if you can't hold it, live. Sorry, Levi muttered under his breath. That's one order I can't follow. Mishi's sharp senses caught it, but he didn't respond. Instead, he gave a faint grin. Then I'll die beside you, Captain. The others followed his lead, the grim resolve in their eyes saying what words could not. Whatever came, retreat was not an option. If Wall Maria fell again, all of Locke's reforms, all of the fragile peace and unity within the walls, would collapse instantly. Everything they had fought for would vanish. This time, there was no room for failure. By dawn, the garrison was a hive of activity. Dozens of soldiers prepared their ODM gear, checked the thunder spears, and loaded the new experimental cannons Locke's engineers had designed under Hank's supervision. The air crackled with purpose, fear buried beneath discipline. Outside the base, Kenny Ackerman stood beneath the shadow of the wall, cigarette between his lips. His men, the anti-personnel control squad, waited nearby, fully armed with their new vertical maneuver rigs and thunder-based launchers. Kenny's usual lazy grin was gone. So it's finally happening, he muttered. Been too damn quiet anyway. He touched the metal case hidden inside his coat, the one Locke had handed him before he departed from the capital. Inside it was the syringe. The power of a Titan. Kenny smirked to himself. Heh, looks like it's finally my turn, Uli. You seeing this from wherever you are? For a moment, his voice softened, then his eyes hardened again. He wasn't here just to help Levi. That was part of it, sure, but the real reason burned deeper. Kenny Ackerman craved strength, the kind that made men gods. If he could bring down an intelligent Titan himself, and consume it, he'd no longer be a man bound by history. Let's move, he ordered, flicking the half-burnt cigarette into the dirt. Keep your eyes sharp. If any of those bastards show themselves, I want them alive." The soldiers behind him exchanged uneasy glances. None had ever seen Kenny this serious, or this alive. Levi, standing atop the southern wall, watched the sunrise bleed over the horizon. He caught sight of the anti-personnel squad mobilizing below and grimaced. So, Kenny was taking the field. TCH, damn fool. He didn't trust the man, not with his back, not even on the same battlefield. But Levi knew one thing for certain: Kenny Ackerman's thirst for power made him useful. If the enemy truly was Marley, he would fight savagely. Levi exhaled, glancing at the distant tree line where the soldier had spotted movement. "Come, then," he whispered. "Let's end this." A campfire burned low in the darkness. Zeke Yeager, sitting with legs crossed, tossed a handful of sand into the flames, watching them spark. Beside him, Reiner Braun tightened the straps of his armor, while Peak fingers stretched lazily on a blanket, her expression amused. "Zeke," Reiner asked, "are we really attacking tomorrow?" Peak laughed softly. "Still scared of the demons in the walls, Reiner? Don't tell me you've gone soft." Reiner glared at her but didn't reply. His stomach twisted with anxiety, not fear for himself, but dread for what lay ahead. Zeke smirked faintly. "You'll be fine. Remember, our objective isn't destruction, it's retrieval. We take back the founding Titan, and we leave. Quickly." Peak arched an eyebrow. "And if they resist?" "Then we show them what Marley's warriors are capable of," Zeke said, his tone cool, measured. "I'll begin the bombardment from a distance. You two break through the southern gate." He looked toward the dark silhouette of the island in the distance, Paradis, the land of the devils, the home he had betrayed once and would betray again. Despite his confidence, something in his chest tightened. "Father, Mother, are you still alive in there?" He forced the thought away. The war against the Middle East alliance was stretching Marley's strength thin. He couldn't afford hesitation. The operation had to be swift. Brutal. In and out, he told himself. Ended before they can even respond. Peak noticed the faint tremor in his hand but said nothing. She understood better than anyone that beneath Zeke's calm exterior was a storm, one that could shatter him, or the world. Reiner, still staring toward the faint outline of Wall Maria, clenched his fists. He had fought here once before, years ago, as a child soldier forced into a war he didn't understand. Now he was back. And this time, he prayed it would finally end. "Eldians inside the walls, forgive us." Back at Shiganshina, Levi's scouts had spotted movement again, distant, rhythmic, and heavy. The tremor reached the ground beneath their feet. Levi's eyes narrowed. "They're coming." Mishi inhaled deeply. "I smell Titans." Levi raised his voice. "Positions. Everyone, get to your stations. This is not a drill." The bells of Shiganshina began to ring, echoing through the district like a heartbeat of war. Soldiers climbed to the walls, engines of ODM gear roaring to life. Far beyond the fields, a faint plume of dust rose, then another, and another. The Titans were approaching. But this time, Paradis was ready. Chapter 188. While the capital within Walsina was engulfed in secret purges, far to the south, at the garrison of Shiganshina district, a single report was enough to shatter the calm. "Are you sure you didn't see wrong?" Levi's voice was low, but the tension in it could have cut glass. His eyes, sharp and unblinking, locked onto the young scout kneeling before him. The soldier swallowed hard, feeling the suffocating weight of not just Levi's gaze, but that of the four officers standing behind him: Mishi Zacharias, Alio Bozado, ELD Jin, and Gunther Schultz, all promoted in the recent military restructuring. The air in the room was thick, heavy with authority. "I'm sure, Captain," the scout stammered, forcing his voice not to break. "Through the telescope, I saw a human silhouette, on a hill, maybe 10 kilometers beyond the outer field. The figure noticed me, then vanished into the mist. I'm certain it wasn't a Titan." Silence fell over the command post. A human outside the wall. That shouldn't be possible, not with the wilderness crawling with titans for miles in every direction. The implication struck everyone at once. If there were humans out there, then Marley had arrived. Levi's expression didn't change. "Understood," he said. "Pass the order, full combat readiness. All stations. Now." "Yes, Captain." The scout saluted so fast he nearly stumbled on his way out, grateful just to escape the room. Mishi let out a low whistle through his teeth. "Well, looks like Locke was right again." "TCH," Levi muttered. "I was hoping he'd be wrong this time." Aluo exhaled, his usual smugness replaced by grim focus. According to his last projection, this is almost certainly a Marleyan incursion. Meaning we'll be facing the Titans again, not mindless ones, but the 9. Gunther nodded. "And we know what that means. At least one of them will be intelligent, likely more." ELD crossed his arms, calm and analytical. "We're not walking blind this time. Commander Locke already briefed us on the 9 Titans' abilities. If we can identify which ones we're facing, we can form countermeasures quickly." "Right," Mishi added. "And the new weaponry gives us an edge. The thunder spears, the long barrel rifles, and mobile cannons, all are finally battle-tested. If Marley hasn't sent a full invasion force, and it's just a strike team, we can hold them." The tension in the room lightened, just slightly. Even so, every man there knew what was at stake. Aluo gave a thin smile. "Then let's make them regret setting foot on this island again." All eyes turned toward Levi. He said nothing for a long time. Then, in a voice as cold and sharp as steel, he said, "Wall Maria will not fall again." A heavy silence followed. The wind outside howled through the cracks in the stone walls, like a whisper of ghosts from years past. Levi looked down at his gloved hands, calloused, scarred, and thought of Locke's last words before he left the capital. "If Marley comes, defend the gate. But don't die for a wall, Levi. Live for the next battle." He exhaled through his nose, jaw tightening. "Sorry, Locke," he murmured under his breath. "I can't retreat." Mishi caught the words but said nothing. Instead, he smirked faintly, adjusting the blade strapped to his gear. "If the captain's not retreating, neither are we." The others nodded in agreement. Gunther's face was pale, but his voice was steady. "Wall Maria's our line. If it falls, the new government collapses. We can't let that happen." Levi's eyes softened for the briefest moment. "Then you all know what to do." Within minutes, the orders spread through the district like wildfire. The garrison roared to life, ODM gear hissing, metal clanging, orders being shouted in the crisp morning air. Squad leaders barked commands, soldiers strapped on thunder spears and maneuver harnesses, and lookouts climbed to the wall tops. A nervous energy filled every heart, but not fear. Determination. At the edge of the garrison, a different kind of soldier was preparing. Kenny Ackerman stood beneath the massive southern gate, cigarette dangling from his lips, eyes reflecting the distant glow of dawn. His anti-personnel control squad, fully armed with the modified ODM rigs designed for city warfare, gathered behind him. The moment he received the news, Kenny's usual lazy posture vanished. The smirk faded from his face, replaced by something cold and eager. "So it's finally happening," he muttered, flicking ash from his cigarette. "About damn time." He reached into his coat and felt the small injection Locke had given him before he left the capital, a vial of Titan serum sealed within a reinforced syringe. Kenny's grin returned, twisted with greed. "Don't worry, Locke. I won't waste your gift." To his men, he barked, "Gear up. We're patrolling the wall perimeter. If any of those things show their ugly faces, we take them down." The soldiers saluted without question, though their expressions betrayed unease. None of them had ever seen Kenny like this, restless, predatory, alive. As they moved out, Kenny's hand lingered over his chest. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Uli, old friend. I'm close now. I'll finally grasp the power you never could. The smile that crossed his face was neither sane nor gentle. Up on the wall, Levi watched the anti-personnel squad from afar, his sharp eyes catching Kenny's figure leading the formation. TCH. So he's here, Levi muttered. He didn't trust him, not for a second. But he didn't stop him, either. If Kenny wanted to fight, fine. As long as his gun was pointed at Marley and not at Levi's men. A low fire burned in the dark as the distant sea winds whistled through the cliffs. 3 figures sat around it, Zeke Yeager, Reiner Braun, and Peak Finger, the vanguard of Marley's strike force. The faint orange light illuminated Zeke's calm face, his glasses reflecting the flames. Tomorrow, he said quietly. At dawn. Reiner tensed. We're attacking that soon? Peak smirked, stretching her arms lazily. Don't tell me you're scared of the devils of parody, Reiner. You've fought them before. Reiner's jaw clenched, but he didn't reply. He still saw the faces of the soldiers he'd fought years ago. The faces of the ones he couldn't forget. Zeke noticed, but his tone remained steady. Our objective hasn't changed. We capture the founding titan, nothing more. We strike fast, finish faster. If the island's defenses have improved, it doesn't matter. They can't counter what they don't understand. Peak's grin faded into something sharper. And if we fail? Then Marley collapses, Zeke said flatly. So we won't. He rose, brushing the dust from his uniform, and looked toward the distant outline of Wall Maria, faint under the starlight. Inside that wall was his father. His mother. His family's legacy, and the truth he was determined to erase. He clenched his fists. No more delays. Peak glanced up at him. For a fleeting moment, she saw weariness beneath his composure, the fatigue of a man carrying the sins of an entire people. She said nothing. Zeke didn't need sympathy. He needed results. Reiner looked at the wall again, the faint wind tugging at his cloak. The memories of the old mission, the fall of Wall Maria, the years spent as a soldier among his enemies, weighed on him heavily than his armor. He whispered under his breath, voice shaking slightly. Forgive us. Eldians within the walls. Then he rose, tightening the straps on his gear. The night was still, until a tremor rippled through the earth. Then another. And another. Levi felt it before anyone else. He turned toward the horizon. Mishi, he said quietly. You feel that? Mishi's eyes narrowed. They're coming. Levi exhaled, drawing both blades from his holsters. Positions. Everyone to your posts. This is not a drill. The bells of Shiganshina began to ring, echoing through the district and out across the plain, the same bells that once signaled humanity's fall. This time, they would signal their stand. From beyond the fields, a distant roar tore through the morning fog, deep, guttural, and inhuman. The ground quaked as silhouettes began to appear on the horizon. And from the walls of Shiganshina, Levi Ackerman watched the enemy approach, his eyes cold, unflinching. The battle for Wall Maria had begun again. But this time, the island was ready. Chapter 189, Zeke Yeager was impatient. Every moment spent here was a moment wasted away from the front lines of the war outside the island. His objective was simple: retrieve the founding titan and return to Marley as quickly as possible. What he didn't realize was that he and his team had already been discovered days ago. From the vantage towers of Wall Maria, the improved telescopes, designed by Hanji Zoe's research unit, had already caught sight of them. And the fact that Zeke chose to advance from the same route Reiner once used years ago? That was a fatal mistake. To Locke, it was not just reckless. It was disrespectful. There is always a price for underestimation. All the suspects have been captured and detained. 967 in total, Petra Rahl reported crisply, though fatigue traced faint shadows beneath her eyes. During the arrests, 32 resisted. All were executed on the spot. Locke leaned back slightly, his tone calm but carrying quiet weight. You've done well, Petra. It couldn't have been easy. Petra gave a faint smile, brushing a lock of auburn hair from her face. It's not hard, Commander. Once this is over, the island will finally have a chance to breathe. Every sleepless night will be worth it. Locke nodded slowly. Nearly 1,000 reactionaries. If they'd managed to seize weapons, we have been looking at civil war. The price we paid is nothing compared to that. He paused, his voice lowering as his gaze fell to the reports stacked before him. Now that they're all in custody, the rest will think twice before stirring. I imagine the others hiding within the city won't dare move for a while. Petra frowned slightly. Most likely. But those who remain won't vanish forever. They'll simply burrow deeper. If we let them regroup, they'll strike again when we least expect it. Commander, I think we should continue the investigations, root them all out before they have a chance to recover. There was a sharp light in her eyes. Petra had always been gentle with her comrades, but when it came to the enemies of humanity, she showed no hesitation. Locke studied her for a moment. You're not wrong, he admitted. But not now. We'll station intelligence units to keep them under surveillance. For the moment, our focus must shift outward. Outward? Petra asked. Yes. Locke's eyes hardened. It's time to guide the people beyond the walls, toward the future we've been preparing for. Parody Island has slept long enough. We must begin rebuilding it, cultivating its land, and forging new strength. The Purge has served its purpose. Continuing it on this scale would only drain our limited resources. He gestured at the map spread across the desk, marked with inked routes, planned settlements, and guarded zones stretching from Wall Maria to the outer coastlines. Our forces are finite, and our reforms are not yet complete. If we spread ourselves too thin, we risk collapse before we can stand. After a long silence, Petra nodded, her expression softening. I understand. Balance before ambition. Locke offered a small smile. Exactly. But Petra's heart was in turmoil. Every decision he made seemed so composed, so precise, like someone who had already lived 100 years and learned the cost of every action. He was 15. Just 15. Yet his presence filled the room more than any general's ever could. And as Petra looked at him, a quiet, dangerous realization began to grow in her chest. When a woman starts to admire a man beyond reason, she's already begun to fall. Locke didn't notice the look in her eyes. He was already turning the conversation elsewhere. How's Hanji's progress? He asked suddenly. Petra sighed. Still buried in her lab, I imagine. I visited twice, she didn't even hear me knock. Whatever she's working on, it's consuming her completely. But from what I can tell, she's very happy. That last part was half annoyance, half genuine fondness. Locke's brows lifted in amusement. Good. Let her be. If she's that focused, it means progress. He stood, stretching lightly. And me? I suppose I have nothing urgent on the schedule today? Petra crossed her arms, feigning anger. Nothing you have to do, no. But Emer, Historia, and I have been handling every report, every deployment, every damn letter that crosses your desk. At this point, you're not the commander, you're a ghost with authority. Locke chuckled. A ghost, I'll remember that. Don't you dare. Before she could finish, he was already walking toward the door. I'll visit Hanji's lab. The rest is in your hands. Commander. Too late. The door shut behind him. Petra puffed her cheeks in frustration, muttering, he always does this. Her irritation only lasted a few seconds before it melted into a smile. Despite her complaints, she knew what this meant. Locke trusted her completely. No one else in the Corps had ever held that level of confidence from him. The guards by the doorway pretended not to notice her flushed expression, their eyes fixed firmly on the ceiling, faces frozen in carefully rehearsed neutrality. None dared smile. Locke's reforms had reshaped parity from the inside out. The Survey Corps, once ridiculed and underfunded, now stood as the most prestigious and well-equipped branch in the military. With the integration of experimental weaponry, tactical command schools, and strict promotion systems, its ranks had grown to over 3,000 trained soldiers, all volunteers, all driven by purpose. The garrison corps, formerly bloated with corruption and laziness, had been cut down from 40,000 to 30,000. Those unfit for service, drunkards, cowards, or bribed officers, were dismissed. In their place rose young recruits from the training corps, eager and unafraid. It was a harsh system. Every quarter, 10 assessments determined a soldier's value. Promotions were based solely on merit. Failures were expelled. At first, many feared it would destroy morale. Instead, it ignited it. For the first time in history, ordinary soldiers had hope of rising through ranks, not through politics or family, but through skill and courage. The military police brigade, once confined to Walsina, had also expanded. Under Erwin Smith's command, its reach now extended across all three walls, Maria, Rose, and Sina, tasked with maintaining order and protecting civilians in the newly reclaimed territories. Its numbers grew from 2,000 to 3,500, reinforced by the best graduates from the training corps. The administrative burden was immense. But with the chain of command reorganized, the once separate branches now worked like parts of a single body, one nation under a single vision. Locke's vision. Locke found the laboratory door half open, steam and light pouring out through the gap. Inside, Hanji Zoe was hunched over a large glass cylinder filled with clear liquid, her hands covered in grease, her hair a tangled mess. Blueprints and Titan nerve diagrams littered the tables around her. Hanji, Locke called softly. She looked up sharply, her eyes bright and wild. Locke! Just in time. You won't believe what I've just confirmed. He smiled. I'm already afraid. Hanji pointed to the massive device beside her. It's working. The nerve synchronization unit. With this, we can transmit controlled impulses through concentrated spinal fluid. It could allow humans to command pure titans within a limited radius. Locke blinked, stunned. You mean artificial coordination? Yes. Hanji's grin widened, manic and proud. Not quite what the founding titan can do, of course, but if we refine it further, we could control battlefield titans like weapons, even without Dina's power. Locke stared at the machine. Its potential was staggering and terrifying. After a long pause, he said quietly, keep this between us for now. If the others hear, they'll either panic or try to use it too soon. Hanji's smile faded slightly, understanding. Right. I'll keep developing it quietly. Locke nodded. Good. We'll need every advantage we can get. He turned toward the window, the faint glow of the afternoon sun falling across his face. Far beyond the wall, Maria, he could already sense it, the air shifting, the quiet tremor of something monstrous moving closer. Marley was coming. And this time, parody would be ready. Chapter 190. Commander. Locke turned as the guards at the door saluted him sharply. Yes, I'll handle this, he replied with a faint nod, motioning for them to remain at their posts. He stepped through the reinforced door and into the wide, metal-scented corridor of Hanji Zoe's experimental laboratory. The sound hit him first, the chaotic rhythm of clanking gears, valves hissing, and Hanji's rapid-fire muttering that never seemed to end. Inside, under the glaring light of oil lamps, Hanji Zoe was pacing back and forth, her coat thrown aside, her hair a chaotic storm as she scribbled equations across a chalkboard already filled to the edges. No, that can't be right. The fuel-to-pressure ratio's still off by 3 degrees, no, 4. Wait, is it the piston alignment again? Or maybe the condensation channel's too narrow? No, that's impossible, I accounted for that already, ack. Her assistant, Maudlit Burner, stood nearby with his ever-present notebook, scribbling notes at a frantic pace while simultaneously dodging flying bolts and tools. Commander Locke, Maudlit whispered as soon as he noticed him, but Locke raised a hand silently, signaling him not to interrupt. He stepped closer, quietly observing the contraption dominating the center of the room, a massive steam engine, thick pipes coiling from its brass frame, hissing softly like a living beast. The walls around it were dark with soot. The faint hum of pressure built and released in small bursts, like shallow breaths. So she really did it, Locke thought, eyes glinting with admiration. When he had first described the concept to her, a machine that breathes heat to create power, he hadn't expected Hanji to take it as a personal crusade. And yet, she had. It was crude and heavy, far from efficient, but it was real. And that was all that mattered. The hardest step had already been taken. Parody Island's first machine of the industrial era was born. Why won't it work? Hanji cried out suddenly, gripping her hair and glaring at the machine as though her anger could power it. Everything's correct. The equations, the angles, the alignment, it's perfect. So why won't you move the way you're supposed to? Locke watched her silently, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. He could see what she couldn't: exhaustion, hunger, and a stubborn brilliance that refused to yield. Hanji's eyes were bloodshot, her voice hoarse, yet she refused to rest. The mad scientist of the core, he thought. And the spark of Parody's future. Moblit looked like he wanted to speak, but when Locke caught his eye and shook his head, he understood immediately. Better to let Hanji reach the realization herself. Moments later, she spun toward him, startled. Locke! How long have you been standing there? I was beginning to wonder if you'd ever notice me, Locke replied with a teasing smirk. It seems I hold a rather important place in your mind after all. Hanji blinked, then laughed, a bright, unrestrained sound that broke through the tension. Don't flatter yourself. I was just busy. But even as she said it, her expression shifted. Something clicked behind her eyes. Wait a second, she gasped, spinning back toward the machine. Moblit! Bring the toolbox! And call in the metalworkers from Workshop 3, right now. Yes, Commander. Moblit darted off without hesitation, knowing from experience that when Hanji got that particular tone of voice, the fate of their equipment, and possibly his sanity, depended on speed. Locke stood where he was, watching as the room transformed into organized chaos. Hanji barked orders, engineers hurried in, tools clattered, pipes were twisted, realigned, sealed again. It was as though the air itself had come alive with her energy. And Locke simply observed, the faint hiss of the steam filling his mind like a heartbeat. So this is how it begins. The birth of power, not Titan, not divine, but human. A creation forged by will and intellect alone. He could already see it, trains roaring across Parody Island, airships drifting above the plains, factories glowing through the night. Civilization reborn not through blood, but through steam. The steam age, he thought. The first revolution of man. But even as pride stirred in him, Locke's mind never stopped calculating. Marley's technology was still decades ahead: electricity, automatic rifles, airships, steel artillery. By comparison, Parody was just learning to crawl. But it was learning. And that was enough. If Marley's reached the age of industry, he murmured, then this island still has time. Time to catch up and surpass them. He thought back to the world's imbalance. Marley's dependence on Titan power had crippled its scientific growth. Their technology was advanced, but uneven. Their arrogance left cracks wide enough to exploit. Locke's gaze sharpened. And I'll use every one of them. For the next hour, the laboratory was alive with the sound of progress. Hanji worked like a conductor at the center of an orchestra, hands moving, mind blazing, voice ringing with instructions that only she could understand. Locke watched her work, half in awe, half in concern. By the time Moblit returned, drenched in sweat and soot, the final adjustments were complete. Fuel ready, one of the engineers shouted. Pressure valves secured, cried another. Hanji stood before the machine, trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the exhaustion of 3 sleepless nights. Everyone, step back. Locke obeyed, folding his arms as the others did the same. Hanji reached for the ignition lever. Her fingers hesitated for half a breath, then pulled. A low hum filled the air. The fuel chamber flared with light. Then, hiss, clang, whir. The pistons began to move. Slowly at first, then faster. The metal wheels turned, releasing a deep rhythmic pulse that echoed through the laboratory. The room fell silent, everyone watching the machine as if afraid to breathe. Then, with a roar of steam, it came fully alive. The first steam engine on Parody Island had begun to move. Hanji froze. Then her eyes widened, mouth parting in wonder. It's working. For a second, disbelief hung in the air. Then she screamed. It's working! We did it! The lab erupted in cheers. Engineers shouted. Moblit threw his notebook into the air and actually laughed. Someone cried from pure relief. Hanji spun, face radiant, tears and soot mixing across her cheeks. Locke! It's a success! We succeeded! Before Locke could react, she rushed at him, flinging her arms around his shoulders. He barely caught her before she collided with him, her laughter bubbling against his chest. We really did it, she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. Finally, success. Her words trailed off, her weight suddenly shifting. Locke glanced down. She was asleep. Just like that, Hanji Zoe, the mad genius who hadn't slept in 3 days, had passed out mid-celebration, a faint smile still lingering on her lips. Moblit rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. Commander Hanji hasn't slept in 72 hours. She said she wouldn't stop until it worked. Locke sighed softly, though his eyes were warm. Of course she did. Moblit quickly ushered the engineers out, giving them a discreet signal to leave the room. Within minutes, the lab was empty, quiet except for the steady hum of the machine. Locke looked down at the sleeping woman in his arms. For once, his calculating mind fell silent. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, speaking in a voice barely above a whisper. You've done enough, Hanji. Thank you for carrying this burden. She stirred faintly, her lips curling into a small, peaceful smile, as though she'd heard him in her dreams. Locke stood there a long time, the soft sound of the engine filling the silence, a promise of what was to come. Outside, the first smoke of the new age rose into the sky above Walrose. And somewhere far beyond it, beyond the horizon and the ocean, Marley was already on the move. Chapter 191, Hanji wouldn't be waking up anytime soon. After carrying her to the small bedroom beside the laboratory and pulling a blanket up over her shoulders, Locke stood for a long moment at her bedside. The faint sound of the steam engine humming through the wall filled the silence like a lullaby. He turned away and walked back into the lab, stopping in front of the still-churning machine. Its steady rhythm echoed in the room, soft, mechanical, alive. Locke couldn't help the small smile forming at the corner of his lips. The revolution has begun. From this moment onward, Parody Island would no longer belong to the past. Power would shift, not just political or military, but something deeper. The shape of civilization itself was about to change. The steam age. Locke whispered. Next comes electricity. But, how? He sighed and rubbed his temple. He was many things, a strategist, a soldier, a leader, but certainly not a scientist. Electricity was a mystery to him, a concept that existed in vague flashes of memory from another life. He could only hope Hanji and her team could unlock that secret for real. If only I could bring in scientists from the outside world. But that was impossible. Those people were national treasures in Marley and the other nations across the sea. Getting even one of them to Parody was as likely as catching lightning in his bare hands. So for now, he had to trust his own people. In the days that followed, Locke remained in Hanji's lab almost constantly. He handled essential military matters through messengers, but most of his attention stayed fixed on the development of the steam engine. He offered ideas when asked, mostly based on scraps of practical logic and faint memories from the world before. To Hanji and the engineers, though, even those bits of insight felt like prophecy. Each test brought the machine closer to perfection. Each spark of progress brought them closer to a future where Titans weren't the only source of power. To Hanji, Locke's brilliance was both exhilarating and infuriating. Strong, intelligent, decisive, and now he's helping me fix engines, she had muttered once. He's not even human at this point. Mob Lid had just nodded in tired agreement. No one in the Corps tried comparing themselves to Locke anymore. It was pointless. Locke, however, barely noticed the admiration. For him, it wasn't about pride, it was necessity. Every discovery was a weapon. Every breakthrough was survival. He didn't have the luxury of being humble or proud. He had a nation to rebuild. The steam project advanced at a breakneck pace. Within weeks, the engines were smaller, more efficient, more stable. A handful of prototypes were already being tested to power mills, pumps, and vehicles. Hanji called it a miracle. Locke simply called it a beginning. But before the first machine could even be deployed, the miracle was interrupted. The door to the laboratory burst open. A messenger, face pale in uniform, torn from running, stumbled inside. Commander Locke. Urgent report from Shiganshina District. Vice Captain Levi's battalion has engaged enemy Titans. They're requesting immediate reinforcements. The air in the lab froze. Locke straightened instantly, his expression shifting from calm curiosity to razor-edged focus. So, it's finally begun. Hanji stirred from her desk, suddenly alert. You're going to lead the response yourself? Locke nodded once. I have to. There's no one else available to command at that level. Hanji frowned. That's not true, you have officers. They're not ready. Locke's tone was quiet but final. We've just reorganized the Corps. Most of our experienced leaders are either integrated into Irwin's command structure or handling internal stability operations. If I send anyone else, it's a gamble. And I don't have time to gamble. His words carried the weight of logic, but beneath them, Hanji heard something else, guilt. Responsibility. He had built this world. If it was to be defended, it had to be by his hand. Hanji hesitated. Then at least promise me this, you'll come back. Locke smiled faintly. Don't worry. I haven't seen our new era yet. I still have to watch you turn steam into lightning. Hanji scowled. Don't make jokes about dying. Not when you're about to ride into hell. I'm not joking, he said gently, then turned to leave. I'll be back before you finish the next engine. Command Headquarters, Walsina. By the time Locke reached the Central Command building, his personal guard was already assembled. Petra, Emer, Irwin, and even Darius Sackley were waiting in the office, grim-faced. Irwin spoke first. Let me lead the expedition this time. Locke shook his head. You can't. The reorganization of the military police and garrison corps is at a critical stage. If you leave now, everything we've built here collapses. Irwin's expression hardened. You're too important to risk. You know that as well as I do. Exactly why I have to go, Locke countered. Zeke Yeager is on the field. If what Levi's scouts reported is accurate, Marley's finally made its move, and the Beast Titan is leading them. That means my presence isn't just reinforcement, it's strategy. Sackley leaned forward, his voice heavy. You're the only person who understands the entire network of our current operations, Locke. If you fall, there's no replacement. Parody will be headless. Locke's lips tightened. If I don't go, Parody may not have a future at all. Silence. It wasn't arrogance in his tone. It was true. Every major reform, every law, every military doctrine, they all stem from him. The others executed, but he planned. If Parody was a body, Irwin and Sackley were its heart and hands. Locke was its mind. Both men exchanged a glance. For once, even Irwin had no rebuttal. Petra finally broke the tension. Her voice trembled slightly. Then at least take me with you. Locke turned to her. No. But. The Survey Corps can't function without you right now, he said gently, though his tone left no room for argument. You're coordinating internal defense, logistics, and training. If something happens here while we're gone, we lose more than a battle, we lose control of the walls. Petra bit her lip. She hated that he was right. Still, the thought of him leaving, again, twisted painfully in her chest. She looked away, muttering, "Then take Emer with you. She's strong enough to make a difference. If she's there, at least you'll have a chance." Locke's eyes softened slightly. "All right. I'll ask her." Before Petra could respond, a familiar, drawling voice came from the doorway. "No need to ask," said Emer, stepping inside with her usual half-smile. "I already heard. If you're going to fight Marley, you'll need me." Locke raised a brow. "You're volunteering." "Let's just say I owe you," Emer replied. "Besides, Krista would kill me if I stayed behind while the rest of you risked your lives." Despite himself, Locke chuckled. "Fair enough." He turned back to the others. "That settles it. I'll take Emer and a strike unit of the Survey Corps. We'll move fast and reinforce Levi before sunrise." Zackley nodded reluctantly. "Then may the walls protect you." Erwin clasped Locke's arm in the old soldier's grip. "Be careful out there. You're carrying more than orders, you're carrying the island's future." Locke smiled thinly. "Then I suppose I have every reason not to die." He turned to Petra, who was still watching him, eyes glistening but defiant. "Take care of things here," he said softly. "When I return, we'll begin the next phase." She swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "You'd better keep your word." Locke paused at the doorway, looking back one last time. "I always do." Then he was gone, his coat flaring behind him, footsteps echoing down the corridor. Outside, the sky was beginning to turn red with dusk. The wind carried a faint chill from the south, the scent of rain, and smoke, and something else. War. Locke inhaled deeply, then looked toward the horizon beyond Walrose. "Hold on, Levi," he murmured. "I'm coming." And with that, he mounted his horse and rode out, Emer and a dozen of Parady's finest at his back, heading straight for Shiganshina, where the Beast Titan waited. Chapter 198. The road home was calm for once. No Titans. No gunfire. Only the sound of hooves striking earth and the rhythmic creak of carts heavy with supplies. For the first time in months, Locke felt the faint echo of peace. All along the reconstructed streets of Wal Maria, people were working, hammering beams into place, clearing rubble, repairing roofs. The air smelled of sawdust and iron. Civilians called to one another, their laughter oddly bright amid the ruins. Only when something's lost do people learn what it's worth. It was true. The citizens of Wal Maria were pouring their hearts into rebuilding the world that the Titans had stolen from them. Every brick was laid with the desperate gratitude of survivors. "That's great," Petra Rahl said cheerfully, riding beside him. Her auburn hair caught the light as she stretched her arms wide. "It won't be long before we get back the prosperity we had before." Locke smiled faintly but didn't answer. His eyes drifted over the workers, over the patched walls and the watchful gendarmes standing guard. The peace looked genuine, almost holy, but beneath it, he felt something off. A stillness too perfect, a silence too heavy. Should I break this illusion myself? The thought lasted only a heartbeat before he dismissed it. Peace built on delusion was only a delay. To truly free this island, either the Rice Royal line must change, or be destroyed. He already knew which path reality would allow. A small carriage rumbled beside them. From its window, Historia Rice, still called Krista by her comrades, peeked out. The wind brushed strands of golden hair across her face, her expression wistful. Seeing that look, Petra leaned closer. "Krista, I don't think any of us ever heard about your family. You've always avoided the subject." "Family." The word came softly, trembling. Historia hesitated, then whispered, "I grew up on a farm. Later, I was sent away." Sent away? Petra frowned. Why would they do that? I don't know, Historia said, shaking her head. Maybe I was just unwanted. The words hung in the air. The mood turned heavy. Even the sound of the wheels seemed to dull. Locke's voice broke the silence. If you had the chance to see your family again, would you take it? Historia looked down. I don't think my father wants to see me. Her tone was small, but there was pain in it, the kind that never healed. She tried to earn love through obedience and kindness, but in her father's eyes, she had always been a burden. Even now, she carried that wound like armor. Before Petra could reply, Emer spoke sharply, as if cutting through fog. Enough about the past. We've got bigger problems ahead. Let's focus on what comes next. Locke's gaze flicked toward her. You're right, he said quietly. After we reach headquarters, the calm will end. He didn't elaborate. But the thought of Grisha Yeager and their unfinished plan burned at the back of his mind. What stage has he reached now? The women didn't press him further. Petra and Emer already sensed it, whatever peace they saw now was temporary. Even if they disliked war, when Locke gave the order, they would fight. They always did. Historia, however, only watched him from the carriage window, uncertain, trusting him blindly. While Locke's convoy moved through the calm outer districts, the royal capital inside Walsina had descended into fear. Giants, appearing without warning, had begun manifesting in the city itself. Sometimes at night. Sometimes in broad daylight. Reports described them bursting from homes, half merged with walls, limbs twisted and fused into stone. The scenes were grotesque. The once proud heart of humanity had become a nightmare. Panic spread faster than fire. Civilians refused to sleep. Streets emptied after sundown. The military police brigade and garrison regiment patrolled constantly, but every day, more men died trying to kill Titans in places Titans should never have existed. Commander Nile Doak looked 20 years older. The black hair that had once been neat and proud was now streaked with gray. His eyes were red from exhaustion, his hands trembling from too much caffeine and too little sleep. Inside the marble chamber, the air was thick with tension and candle smoke. Still no answers? Darius Zachary, the commander-in-chief, spoke in a deep, worn voice. Nile bowed his head. No, sir. We found nothing. The incidents now occur both night and day. Witnesses claim the Titans emerged from within the houses themselves. It makes no sense. Emerge? Zachary echoed, frowning deeply. He recalled the disturbing images in the latest reports, Titans fused into buildings, their upper bodies clawing through stone as if born from it. What could cause such a thing? He murmured, rubbing his temples. His gaze turned to the man seated across the long table. Commander Irwin, he said gravely, do you have any theories? The room fell silent. Of the 40-plus officials who once filled these seats, fewer than a dozen remained alive. The rest, ministers, nobles, military officers, had died in the chaos of recent months. If things continued this way, the very structure of government would collapse. Irwin Smith rose slowly from his chair. His uniform was immaculate, his expression calm. Only the faint shadow under his eyes betrayed how little sleep he had. During our operations against the Titans, Irwin began, Commander Locke made a radical observation. His voice carried clearly through the chamber. He proposed that Titans are not born monsters, but transformed humans. The words fell like stones into a still pond. Ridiculous. Nile snapped, slamming his fist on the table. How can you say something so absurd? He wasn't alone. Several of the ministers began murmuring angrily, faces pale with disbelief. The idea itself was heresy. It meant every Titan they'd ever killed might once have been one of their own. Zachary didn't speak immediately. He studied Irwin's face, weighing every word. After a long pause, he asked quietly, and the crystalline girl you brought back, the one encased in hardened material, was she also a Titan? Irwin met his gaze. Yes. She was retrieved from the nape of a Titan's neck. That is why we believe the transformation theory holds. A collective shiver passed through the room. Niall's voice rose again, tight with anger. Then why wasn't this stated in your official reports? Erwin's eyes narrowed slightly. If I had, would you have believed it? Niall opened his mouth, then shut it again. The silence that followed was answer enough. At the door, Levi Ackerman smirked faintly, his usual disdain flashing in his eyes. Zachary sighed heavily. Let's set aside whether this claim is true or not. The question remains, how do we stop the attacks happening inside the walls? No one answered. Every man in that room understood the implication. If Titans could appear inside human settlements, if they were truly transformed from ordinary people, then there was no safety anywhere. Any citizen could be a monster waiting to awaken. The weight of it pressed down on them like a physical force. For the first time, the leadership of humanity found itself speechless. Zachary broke the silence again, his tone grim. Erwin, if your theory is correct, then this is not an invasion, it's an infection. That means it can happen again, anywhere, to anyone. Erwin's jaw tightened. Exactly. Which is why we must locate the source. If the transformation is caused by an outside agent, or by someone controlling these Titans, that person is inside our walls right now. Niall slammed a hand on the table. You're suggesting treason? That one of us working with the Titans? I'm suggesting possibilities, Erwin said calmly. But we can't rule it out. A murmur rippled through the ministers. Fear twisted into paranoia. Zachary finally raised a hand. Enough. He turned to Levi. And you, Captain. What's your assessment? Levi's eyes were cold and sharp. If Titans are showing up in houses, then someone's putting them there. Find whoever's moving in and out of those neighborhoods. Start with the interior MPs, they're always hiding something. Niall glared at him, but didn't argue. Zachary nodded slowly. Do it. Erwin, take command of the joint investigation. I'll authorize immediate coordination between the Corps and military police. Yes, sir, Erwin said. Zachary leaned back, fatigue etched into every line of his face. May the walls protect us, he muttered, though his voice carried little faith. Outside the capital, far from the council chamber's tension, Locke's column continued moving toward the new headquarters at Trost. The air was crisp, the road quiet, but his mind was anything but. He thought of the fragile peace he'd seen among the workers. He thought of the fear brewing in the capital. And he thought of the truth they were all still too afraid to face. The enemy isn't just outside the walls anymore. It's within us. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Locke slowed his horse and looked toward the distant line of smoke where the capital stood. Soon, the truth would break through the lies. When it did, the world would burn again. He whispered to himself, barely audible beneath the wind. It's beginning. Chapter 199, The prison air was thick with salt, iron, and despair. Locke could hear faint weeping before he even opened the door, ragged, human sounds that clashed with the cold clang of steel chains. Inside, the stench of blood and medicine mingled with the dampness of the stone. It was obvious Grisha Yeager had been crying. His eyes were red, his voice low as he turned toward Locke. Behind him, muffled sobs came from the deeper cells, Dina Fritz's voice, tinged with heartbreak. Somewhere between them, faint angry grunts echoed, likely Reiner, still gagged but not silent. Locke exhaled softly. Did you convince him? Grisha wiped his face, trying to compose himself. Zeke agreed, to cooperate, he said carefully. But... He looked back toward the cells. His voice trembled. I still can't trust him completely. Locke raised a brow. He's your biological son, isn't he? Seems like a problem only you could have. Grisha gave a humorless laugh. It's because he's my son that I can't trust him. I haven't seen him since he was a child. I made him into what he is now. And for that, I'll always feel responsible. He turned back to Locke, his tone hardening. But guilt doesn't change the truth. Be careful, Locke. Don't let sentiment blind you. The future of Eldia depends on what you do next. Locke nodded solemnly. I know. Then come, Grisha said, straightening. It's time you met him. The deeper chamber was lit only by torchlight. In one corner, Zeke Yeager sat upright, hands bound in heated shackles that hissed faintly against his wrists. Beside him, Dina Fritz watched silently, her face pale but calm. Across the hall, Reiner Braun thrashed weakly against his restraints, while Peak Finger lay motionless on the ground, her eyes half closed, either unconscious or pretending to be. When Locke and Grisha entered, the low hum of tension seemed to thicken. Zeke's eyes flicked toward them immediately. He had been awake for some time, quietly observing everything, the guards, the layout, the torch placements, even the echo of footsteps. His mind was always working. He had heard the stories from Dina and Grisha about the new commander of the Survey Corps, his ambition, his intellect, his terrifying ability to inspire others. But he hadn't expected him to be so young. You're Locke, Zeke said, his voice calm but curious. He studied the man in front of him, short-cropped hair, sharp eyes, posture as steady as stone. You're not what I pictured. Locke didn't smile. And you're the Beast Titan, he said quietly. You've made quite the mess of my island. Zeke didn't flinch. Are you here to kill me, or to talk? Depends on your answer, Locke replied. He stepped closer, his gaze unyielding. Tell me, are you truly willing to cooperate? For a moment, silence filled the cell. Then Zeke met his eyes fully, trying to read the truth behind them. What he saw unsettled him. There was no hatred in Locke's stare. No anger, no fear. Only purpose. Zeke frowned. How could someone so young carry eyes like that? He hesitated, long enough for Dina to shift beside him, tugging gently at her restraints to draw his attention. She gave him a small, meaningful look. Zeke finally exhaled. What exactly do you want from me? Technology, Locke said simply. Zeke blinked. That's all? He had expected many things, plans for conquest, demands for Titan secrets, a bid to overthrow Marley. But not that single word. You're wasting my time if this is a test, Zeke said warily. You know I'm a soldier, not an engineer. My value is in command. Locke shook his head. Your personal strength is irrelevant. Power fades. Titans can die. But technology. He leaned closer. That endures. Zeke's eyes narrowed. You speak like someone who's seen Marley's cities. Locke smiled faintly. Let's just say I know enough. For the first time, Zeke's composure wavered. Then you're not from the walls, are you? I was born here, Locke replied. But the walls are no longer cages. They're stepping stones. Zeke sat back, studying him again. You know, your ideals sound impossible. Marley's dominance is built on centuries of control. They'll never allow Eldians, on or off this island, to rise. Locke's voice hardened. That's exactly why they must fall. Dina's breath caught, but Grisha raised a hand to stop her. Locke's words were steady, but his eyes burned with quiet fury. I want an Eldia that's free, he said. Not one hiding behind walls, not one caged by guilt. And I want to end Marley's chains, by force if I have to. He paused, then added coldly, to be honest, I think Eldians who serve Marley deserve to die. Zeke's jaw clenched. So that's what you think of me. It's what you've been, Locke said, voice like steel. But it's not what you have to stay. The silence that followed was heavy. Only the faint hiss of the torches filled it. Dina looked torn, hope flickering in her eyes. Grisha stood motionless, letting the two men speak as equals for the first time. Zeke looked down, his voice low. Cruel words, but not untrue. We were taught obedience since birth. Marley made sure of that. There was never another choice. There wasn't, Locke agreed. Until now. Zeke's head rose slightly at that. He could tell from Locke's tone, it wasn't arrogance. It was certain. The kind of conviction that made empires move. Zeke hesitated, then asked, and the others? Reiner and Peak? Dead weight, Locke said bluntly. They'll die. Zeke's brow furrowed. You're quick to judge. Locke smirked. Spare me the hypocrisy. You know better than anyone how your system works. Inheritors devour their predecessors. 13 years, then a new vessel. You're no stranger to blood. Zeke inhaled deeply through his nose, forcing calm back into his voice. Perhaps. But you're no savior either. Never claimed to be. For a long time, they just stared at each other. Two men, both carrying Eldia's curse in different forms, one by blood, one by destiny. Then Zeke exhaled slowly. Even if I wanted to help you, technology doesn't evolve overnight. It takes infrastructure, knowledge, and resources. Parity doesn't have those things. You underestimate us, Locke said, almost amused. We've already begun. Hanji developed the first working steam engine. The rest will follow. That made Zeke blink. Steam, he murmured. On this island? Locke nodded. It's only a beginning. But with your knowledge, and your connections, we can accelerate it. Zeke tilted his head. Connections? Locke's gaze sharpened. I know about the nations Marley destroyed. The ones that still resist in secret. They have scientists, inventors, and engineers who hate Marley as much as you do. Zeke's eyes widened. How do you? Because I know how your empire operates, Locke interrupted. And I know that if you reach out to them, they'll listen. Not to me. Not to Grisha. But to you. Zeke fell silent, realization dawning. He knew Locke was right. If he could reach the remnants of Marley's enemies, those scattered nations clinging to survival, they could bring their knowledge to parity. It was dangerous, impossible even, but not unthinkable. Locke's voice softened. You can bring them here. That's all I ask. Zeke stared at him, searching for deceit, and found none. Why should I trust you? He asked finally. Locke's answer was immediate. Because I'm giving you what you never had, a choice. Zeke's lips parted, then closed again. His expression darkened, torn between defiance and something like respect. He looked to Grisha and Dina. They said nothing, but the look in Grisha's eyes said everything. Pride. Fear. Hope. After a long pause, Zeke said quietly, I can give you a chance. 1. Locke tilted his head. Define chance. Zeke leaned forward slightly, the chains at his wrists clinking. If you want the world's exiles to help you, you'll need more than speeches. You'll need sincerity. Real proof that this island can change, that it won't repeat Marley's sins. He held Locke's gaze. Show me that, and I'll make the contact myself. The challenge hung between them, sharp as a blade. Locke's expression didn't waver. I accept, he said simply. Zeke studied him for another long moment, then leaned back, smiling faintly for the first time. Then I'll look forward to seeing what kind of devil you really are. As they left the cell, Grisha's steps were heavy but steady. You did well, he said quietly. Locke's tone was flat. He agreed because he sees an angle. Not because he believes me. Grisha smiled sadly. That's how belief starts. Behind them, in the dark cell, Zeke sat motionless. Dina reached out, her fingers brushing his sleeve. Do you really trust him? Zeke's eyes glinted in the half-light. No, he said. But I'm beginning to wonder if I should. Chapter 200, Locke's face was calm as a blade. I can let you live, he said without emotion. So you won't leave this world with regrets. Zeke's expression didn't shift to gratitude. If anything, it hardened. That isn't an attractive condition, he replied, eyes flicking over to Grisha and Dina with a meaning that needed no translation. Before anyone could speak, a whisper of movement, sharp, surgical, cut the air. A knife flashed. Pain bloomed across Zeke's shoulder as steel nicked the skin in his neck, blood welled and ran slow and red. The sound was small and intimate against the stone silence. "Don't!" Dina cried, half rising, shock and maternal terror colliding in her voice. She tried to lurch forward. Grisha's hand clamped over her mouth and held her back, fingers iron as guilt and resolve warred across his face. Locke watched them all. For a moment, something like surprise crossed his features. He had misjudged a detail of human nature. Women were soft-hearted, mothers were softer still. He made a quiet note to himself. If influence and control had to be welded with subtler tools, he would remember that. For the plan's sake, he could be ruthless, but he would not waste an advantage to breed needless enemies. He sheathed the blade as Zeke hissed, more from anger than pain. Up close, see, the beast's fear was obvious, not of death itself, but of the calculation and forces around him. "Do you think I dare kill you?" Locke asked lightly. "You don't play games." Zeke's voice shook with outrage. He'd expected bargaining, threats, promises, but not the cold intimacy of a knife stroke. He had grown up on hard bargains. This was another kind of pressure. Locke's gaze didn't waver. "Do you object to my earlier offer?" Zeke's breath was ragged. He swallowed. "No. I'll help you make contacts. But success is on me, not you." "Good." Locke's smile was faint. "It would have been better if you'd seen reason sooner. Maybe then you wouldn't have committed the things you did." "You played dirty," Zeke whispered, venom edged with a broken tone. "Aren't you afraid I'll betray you?" Locke's reply was almost mild. "Technology matters. But if worse comes, if we run into an impossible wall, what then? At worst, let the world bury itself with me." There was a madness behind the words, a defiant, all-consuming willingness to risk everything. Madness, Zeke spat. Peak, who had lingered at the edge of consciousness in the next cell, shuddered and could no longer maintain the pretense of sleep. Something in Locke disturbed her down to her bones. This youth carried the kind of vision that toppled orders. "You are a madman," Zeke yelled. "Maybe," Locke said, turning to leave, the blade's small kiss still fresh in the beast's memory. "But it's better than waiting to be slaughtered." Zeke's anger settled into a brittle pragmatism. He thought of what his life had been, of the small, cold certainties of Marley's command. Options had been scarce, freedom rarely offered. The idea of being useful on his own terms, of leveraging his position to make arrangements rather than obey, had an appeal. He breathed out, and the tension in his shoulders eased. "If I want to live," he muttered, "I have no choice." "Exactly." Locke's nod was brief. Zeke's voice softened, edged with something like wry curiosity. "You're interesting. This is going to be interesting." He looked to Grisha and to Dina then, guilt and a measure of odd, private relief flickering across his face. Dina broke free of Grisha's restraining hand and moved close, mother to son, eyes raw and pleading with the hurt of everything. Locke didn't linger for that scene. He stepped away, saying, "I'll go out. I'll leave them to you." Grisha, voice heavy with the weight of a father's contradictions, promised, "I won't let Dina do anything reckless. I'll keep her from undoing this." Locke accepted the promise. He didn't want to know what the three of them might say next. Binding iron chains with lock and key would hold them for now. The restraints were heavy, purpose-built. Without his key, the men could not remove them. Passing through the guard lines, Locke found Petra and Emer waiting, their hands full of report sheets and lists. 1,000 small tasks waited in the corridors of power. "Thank you for your work," Locke said with a quick, sincere tilt of the head. The two women rolled their eyes in tandem at his formality. "Since you know how hard we've worked, stop standing there and making snitty remarks," Emer grumbled. "Help!" Petra pushed a stack of papers forward. "Get ordering these reports, merge them into the book we'll submit to the government. No shortcuts, procedures are the backbone of stability." Locke understood. Even with his influence, the process could not be ignored. Petra's point was practical: legitimacy needed paperwork, or the facade would crumble into chaos. They knuckled down and finished the paperwork with practiced efficiency. The three of them worked in near silence. Each sheet was a small brick in the edifice of control that Locke was building. When the last bundle was bound, Locke asked casually, "Is Historia still assigned to headquarters?" "Yeah," Emer replied. "We couldn't find anyone else to leave in charge. She's accepted, and the troops respect her name. No problems." Petra looked puzzled. Why the sudden interest in Historia? "Just caution," Locke said smoothly. "We're stabilizing things, but I want contingency plans, especially for those tied to the royal line. Better safe than sorry." Petra's mouth thinned. "You mean?" "Exactly," Locke said. "If anything goes sideways, I want backups in place." They both fell silent. The name of the Puppet King, the legacy of the Reese family, the fragility of newfound order, every piece fit into the larger machinery Locke was assembling. For stability to hold, the people who might pull at threads, nobles, old factions, relatives with claims, had to be watched and constrained. Outside, the city hummed, workers, soldiers, the low thrum of life returning. Inside, the machinery of rule wound on, interrogations, detainments, files filed in triplicate. Locke looked at his companions. "Get some rest. We'll need you." Emer snorted, but there was relief in her otherwise dour expression. Petra smiled, thin but real. Locke turned away and walked toward the window. In the distance, the walls caught the light of the afternoon. He let his fingertip trace the scene where steel met glass, small, meaningless motion, and yet it steadied him. This was only the beginning. The binding choices would come hard and fast. Friends and enemies, blood and policy, they would be woven together into something fierce and enduring, or they would splinter the island apart. He thought, briefly, of the three in the cell: a father, a mother, a son. Of the beast who might now be an ally, of the armored and cart titans, still bound and living. Power had the shape of teeth and hunger and terrible pragmatism. He had used a blade to point a truth into the beast, and it had done what he required. One way or another, the future would be bought in blood or built in iron, and he would choose the path that kept the island alive. "Don't sleep on your guard," he murmured to himself. "Peace is a fragile thing." The papers in Petra's hands rustled as the afternoon light shifted. Outside, men sang as they worked on the roofs. Somewhere, a child laughed. Locke turned back to his duties. There was no time for sentiment. The next move, quiet, inexorable, was already forming in his mind. That's the end of this tale for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in part 11. Peace.